The warning sirens on New Haven had been screaming for just over 4 minutes when the first wave of plasma fire tore through the planet's atmosphere. From the bridge of the human battleship Defiance, Admiral Jack Rourke stood completely still, hands clasped behind his back, eyes locked on the tactical display hovering before him. The screen was a nightmare painted in red and green. Green icons representing civilian evacuation vessels blinked out one after another as hostile warships shredded them apart without hesitation. Admiral, we're receiving an incoming transmission from the enemy flagship, Lieutenant Commander Kate Morgan reported. Her voice was controlled, professional, but the faint tremor in her hands betrayed the horror she was trying to suppress. Patch it through, Jack replied quietly. The main display flickered, then resolved into the towering image of an alien commander. The being's body was covered in dark emerald scales, his narrow yellow eyes gleaming with smug satisfaction. His mouth curved into something that passed for a smile, revealing rows of serrated teeth. When he spoke, his voice came out in sharp, clicking sounds, instantly translated by the ship's systems. I am Supreme Warlord Kazeth of the Dominion. This world now belongs to us. Your people are dying even as we speak. Jack said nothing. The alien continued, clearly enjoying the moment. Surrender your remaining colonies immediately. Comply, and we will halt the bombardment. Resist, and every human settlement will be reduced to ash. Behind the warlord, another section of New Haven's capital city vanished in a blinding wave of green fire. Entire districts, homes, schools, hospitals, simply ceased to exist. Jack's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council only 12 years earlier. In that short time, they had shared technology, offered trade, and avoided entangling themselves in alien conflicts. To the older species, humans were young, inexperienced, and, most dangerously, easy prey. The Dominion had decided to test that assumption. The transmission ended. Silence swallowed the bridge, broken only by the relentless flood of incoming damage reports. Orbital defense station destroyed. Civilian shelters collapsing. Emergency medical centers neutralized. Jack turned slightly. Casualty estimates? Kate swallowed hard as she checked her display. Current projections exceed 2 million civilian deaths, sir. And the numbers are still rising. 2 million. The figure hung in the air like poison. 2 million lives. Parents, children, entire families wiped out in minutes. Jack's thoughts drifted uninvited to Earth, to Blue Ocean's quiet streets and the people he loved. Then his mind snapped back to the burning world before him, to the smug face of the warlord who had ordered its destruction. "Get me Ambassador Hale," Jack said. It took several tense minutes to establish a secure channel to the Galactic Council station. When Ambassador Henry Hale finally appeared on screen, the elderly diplomat's face was streaked with tears. "My daughter was on New Haven," Henry said softly. She was visiting a coastal research facility with my grandchildren when the attack started." Jack closed his eyes briefly. He had attended that child's birthday just 3 months earlier. "I'm sorry, Henry," Jack said. "I truly am." The ambassador straightened, grief hardening into resolve. "The council is calling an emergency session. They're demanding we surrender all remaining colony worlds. Most of the member species expect compliance." "And what do you expect?" Jack asked. Henry's eyes sharpened. "I expect they've just made the worst mistake of their existence." The connection ended. Jack turned to face his crew. Every officer on the bridge was watching him, faces pale, fists clenched. All of them had lost someone on New Haven. "Earth Command is requesting a full strategic assessment," Kate said. "They want to know our options." Jack walked to the viewport and stared out at the stars. Somewhere beyond that endless darkness, the Dominion was celebrating what they believed to be an easy victory. "They think fear will break us," Jack said slowly. "They think we'll kneel." He turned back. "History says otherwise." He met Kate's eyes. "Do you know what happened after Pearl Harbor?" She nodded. "Humanity went to war." Jack's voice dropped to a cold whisper. "Then relay this to Earth Command. Initiate full mobilization. Activate every asset." Kate hesitated. "Sir, Project Blackout is classified beyond. I know exactly what it is. Jack said, and I know why it exists. He glanced once more at the casualty counter ticking upward. They murdered our people. They laughed while doing it. His eyes burned with restrained fury. They're about to learn why humanity is feared when pushed too far. Jack returned to his command chair and began composing a message to Earth. 3 words. 3 words that would shake the galaxy. We strike back. The Galactic Council chamber on Nexus Prime was designed to symbolize unity. An enormous circular hall where more than 100 species gathered as equals beneath a dome of shifting starlight. Floating platforms carried delegates to their assigned positions, while holographic translators shimmered softly, converting speech into dozens of languages in real time. Today, the chamber felt less like a forum of peace and more like a tribunal. Ambassador Henry Hale stood alone on humanity's platform. He had not slept in 3 days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw New Haven burning. He heard the echoes of emergency sirens and imagined the terrified cries that had gone unanswered. Worst of all, he saw his daughter's face, alive, laughing, frozen forever in memory. Around him, alien delegates watched with a mix of pity, indifference, and barely concealed disdain. The tall, silver-skinned Illyrians shifted uncomfortably. The massive fur-covered Gorathians appeared bored, as though the suffering of 2 million humans was little more than background noise. The energy-based Lamari flickered softly, observing in silence, and across the chamber, standing tall and proud, was a Dominion delegation. At their center stood Supreme Warlord Kazet himself, scales polished, posture relaxed. He wore victory like a crown. High Counselor Mirialis, a being of radiant golden light, raised her hands. The chamber quieted instantly. We convene to address the recent conflict between the Dominion and the Human Federation, she announced. The Dominion has presented its terms. Ambassador Hale, does humanity have a response? Every eye turned toward Henry. The unspoken expectation was heavy. In galactic history, weaker civilizations always chose survival over pride. They surrendered territory, paid tribute, and lived on under the shadow of stronger powers. That was a natural order of things. Henry took a slow breath. Humanity requests 3 standard days to consult with our government, he said calmly. A harsh, clicking laugh echoed across the chamber. Kazeth leaned forward, amusement dripping from his voice. 3 days? To prepare your surrender speech, perhaps? Take all the time you need, little human. The outcome is inevitable. Several delegations laughed along with him. Henry did not react. He simply inclined his head slightly and stepped back. From a nearby platform, an elderly alien scholar watched the exchange with grave concern. Counselor Threxian of the Veil species had spent over a century studying emerging civilizations. Of all those present, he understood humanity best, and that knowledge filled him with dread. When the session adjourned, the chamber dissolved into conversation. Dominion officers crowded around their warlord, congratulating him openly. Laughter followed them as they moved. Threxian approached cautiously. Supreme Warlord, he said, bowing his head respectfully. May I speak with you? Kazeth turned, eyes glittering. Have you come to praise our victory, old one? I have come to warn you, Threxian replied. The warlord's amusement faded slightly. Go on. I have studied human history extensively, Threxian said. They are not like other young species. When attacked, they do not submit. They do not bargain. They respond with total force, and they do not stop until their enemy is utterly broken. A few Dominion officers snorted in laughter. Kazeth raised a clawed hand, silencing them. You're describing ancient history. Humans have been peaceful members of the Council for 12 years. Peaceful because no one pushed them. Threxian said quietly. He leaned closer. You killed over 2 million of their civilians. You destroyed schools, hospitals, children. In Veil culture, silence was a sign of deep unease. Threxian lowered his voice further. In human culture, there is no greater crime. Kazeth stared at him for a long moment, then laughed loudly. You exaggerate. Humanity has 3 colonies and a modest fleet. We control this sector. They cannot challenge us. That is what their enemies always believe. Phyrexian replied. And those enemies no longer exist. The warlord shook his head dismissively and turned away. That night, alone in his quarters, Phyrexian accessed the human historical archives. He watched grainy footage of soldiers charging through gunfire, advancing even as comrades fell beside them. He saw frozen battlefields, ruined cities, and people rebuilding from ashes with unyielding resolve. He listened to a translated recording of an ancient human leader, speaking during humanity's darkest hour. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight in the streets. We shall never surrender. Phyrexian powered down the display and sat in silence. You fools, he whispered into the darkness. You have no idea what you have awakened. Back on Earth, the emergency session of the United Human Assembly lasted exactly 47 minutes. The final vote was unanimous. Total war across the planet. Factories shifted overnight. Civilian production lines were dismantled and rebuilt into weapons manufacturing hubs. Shipyards converted cargo docks into warship construction bays. Research facilities unlocked sealed vaults containing technologies the galaxy had never seen. Recruitment centers overflowed. Men and women of every age and background stood in endless lines, not out of obligation, but choice. The attack on New Haven had done what no treaty ever could. It had united humanity. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral Jack Rourke stood in the primary war chamber, surrounded by holographic projections of fleet movements and hidden installations. General Miriam Hampton stood beside him. The Dominion believes we have 42 active warships, she said. Jack's lips curved into a thin smile. Show me the real numbers. The display shifted. Hidden shipyards appeared among asteroid belts. Secret lunar bases flickered into view. Vessels long absent from any public registry emerged from the shadows. 187 combat-ready ships, Hampton reported, including 12 heavy battleships and a carrier group we've been building in secret. Jack nodded slowly. Humanity had hoped it would never come to this, but the galaxy had forced their hand. And now, the sleeping giant was fully awake. Deep beneath the scarred surface of the moon, the doors to Laboratory Black 7 slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Inside, cold white lights illuminated a structure so vast it filled the entire hangar, an immense metallic sphere wrapped in layered conduits, antenna rays, and pulsing energy veins. Dr. Samuel Arden stood at the observation platform, hands clasped behind his back, staring at the weapon he had sworn would never be used. Project Blackout. Originally designed as a last resort defensive system, the device could emit an electromagnetic pulse powerful enough to cripple every electronic system within an entire star system. Ships, stations, weapons. Everything would go dark in a single instant. No targeting. No shields. No life support beyond emergency reserves. Too dangerous. Too absolute. That had been the official verdict. Final diagnostics complete, a technician reported. Power stabilization is holding at 100%. Sam exhaled slowly, prepared for transport. You're certain? The technician asked quietly. Sam's eyes hardened. They killed 2 million civilians. Certainty stopped being a luxury. Hours later, Project Blackout was secured in the belly of the Defiance, across human space. Similar preparations were underway. In orbit above Mars, Captain Elias Torres walked the corridors of his new command, the destroyer Swift Justice. The ship was sleek, fast, and bristling with weapons, its hull still smelling faintly of fresh alloy. Torres ran his hand along the bulkhead, memories pressing in. His wife, Anna, had been a teacher on New Haven. She'd taken her students to a coastal research station the morning the bombardment began. Torres had watched the footage countless times, pausing and rewinding, hoping, foolishly, to see some sign that she had survived. There was none. Captain, his executive officer said, approaching. Orders just came through. We're assigned a vanguard assault. Torres nodded once. Good. He turned toward the bridge. I want us at the front. Throughout the fleet, grief transformed into resolve. Crews loaded weapons. Pilots ran combat simulations that had once been purely theoretical. Soldiers checked rifles and armor in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Humanity had not forgotten how to wage war. In his quarters aboard the Defiance, Admiral Jack Rourke reviewed the final intelligence briefings. Human operatives have spent years quietly mapping Dominion space, cataloging fleet movements, identifying command structures, analyzing defensive networks. The Dominion believed humans were naive newcomers. They were wrong. Jack's gaze drifted to a photograph resting on his desk. It showed him standing beside Ambassador Hale and his family at a birthday celebration. Children laughing, faces smeared with frosting. All of them were gone. Jack slipped the photo into his pocket and stood. "Status report," he said as he entered the bridge. Lieutenant Commander Kate Morgan turned from her station. "All task groups report ready. Fleet formation is complete." Jack took his seat. The main display revealed the full scope of humanity's hidden strength: 187 warships, crews hardened by loss, weapons forged with purpose. "Open a channel to all vessels," Jack ordered. A moment later, the screen filled with faces from across the fleet. Jack stood. "This is Admiral Rourke," he began. 3 days ago, the Dominion attacked New Haven without warning. They slaughtered our civilians. They destroyed our homes. And then they demanded our surrender." His voice remained steady, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. "Today we give them our answer." Silence filled the channel. "We will show the galaxy that humanity does not kneel to murderers. We defend our people. We protect our own. And when pushed, we respond with overwhelming force." Jack straightened. "All ships, engage hyperspace. Set course for Dominion border space." One by one, human vessels vanished into streaks of light. The storm had been unleashed. The Dominion border defense network had stood unchallenged for centuries. 43 massive stations armed with enough firepower to annihilate any invasion force. As the human fleet emerged from hyperspace, alarms blared across the nearest station. "Deploy Project Blackout," Jack commanded. Beneath the Defiance, the colossal sphere detached and began to glow with brilliant blue energy. Dr. Arden watched from the observation deck, heart pounding. "Pulsing 3, 2, 1. The sphere detonated. A silent wave of electromagnetic energy surged outward, washing over the defense network at the speed of light. Every screen went dark. Every weapon shut down. Every station drifted helplessly, transformed from fortress to floating wreck. All enemy stations disabled," Kate reported. "No power signatures detected." Jack nodded. "Vanguard, move in." The Swift Justice surged forward. Captain Torres locked eyes on the nearest immobilized cruiser, the same class of ship that had bombarded New Haven. "Target acquired," his weapons officer said. Torres's voice was calm. "Fire everything." The destroyer unleashed hell. Plasma cannons tore through the enemy hull. Missiles followed, detonating deep within the powerless vessel. The cruiser erupted in a violent explosion, scattering debris across space. Target destroyed. Torres didn't celebrate. Next, without power, without weapons, the Dominion patrol fleet was systematically erased. It wasn't a battle. It was retribution. Meanwhile, General Hampton led ground forces back to New Haven. Dominion troops still occupied the ruins, confident that no counterattack would come. Human dropships descended like meteors. The first firefight lasted less than 5 minutes. When it ended, not a single Dominion soldier remained standing. "Secure the area," Hampton ordered. "Find survivors. Record everything." Her forces moved through the devastation, documenting mass graves, destroyed hospitals, shattered schools. Evidence of war crimes streamed across galactic networks in real time. The galaxy watched, and for the first time, it began to understand. The Dominion had built its empire on fear. For centuries, entire star systems had surrendered the moment Dominion fleets appeared on their scanners. Resistance was brief, brutal, and pointless. Their war doctrine was simple: overwhelm, annihilate, conquer. No one had ever pushed back. Until now. As human task forces punched deeper into Dominion territory, military installations fell with terrifying speed. Orbital shipyards that had taken generations to construct were reduced to drifting debris fields. Supply depots erupted in chains of explosions. Fleet assembly points vanished from the star charts entirely. Admiral Jack Rourke did not slow the advance. He wasn't just winning battles. He was dismantling an empire. On the Dominion capital world of Kareth Prime, Supreme Warlord Kazeth received the first verified casualty reports. At first, he dismissed them as errors, panic-induced exaggerations from incompetent subordinates. Then the numbers kept climbing. Entire border fleets gone. Defense stations silent. Shipyard destroyed. How is this possible? Kazeth snarled, slamming a clawed fist into his command console. The border network has never failed. An officer hesitated before answering. Our systems, they went dark, Supreme Warlord. Simultaneously. No warning. No recovery. Fear crept into Kazeth's eyes for the first time. He ordered an emergency redeployment. Remaining fleets would converge and form a unified defensive line. It was the only option left. Human ships arrived before the regrouping was complete. Every time Dominion forces assembled, human strike groups emerged from hyperspace with surgical precision. Ambush followed ambush. No wasted movement. No hesitation. It was as if the humans knew exactly where the Dominion would be before they got there, because they did. 3 days after the attack on New Haven, the human fleet arrived in orbit of Kareth Prime. The planet below was vast, lush continents, deep oceans, and a population exceeding 8 billion. Military bases dotted the surface. What remained of the Dominion fleet, barely 50 ships, hung in a desperate formation above the world. On the bridge of the Defiance, alarms sounded. Supreme Warlord Kazeth is requesting a communication channel, Kate reported. Jack studied the tactical display for a moment, put him through. The warlord appeared on screen, but the arrogance was gone. His scales were dull, his posture rigid. Fear hid poorly behind forced composure. Admiral Rourke, Kazeth began. Surely we can discuss terms. The Dominion is prepared to negotiate an immediate ceasefire. New Haven will be returned. Reparations will be paid. Jack's expression didn't change. You murdered over 2 million civilians, he said calmly. You bombed hospitals. You destroyed schools. And then you laughed. Kazeth swallowed. Continuing this war will only create more suffering. Let's end this now. Jack leaned forward. I will give you one chance, he said. One chance you never gave the people of New Haven. The bridge was silent. Surrender unconditionally within 1 hour. Transfer every individual responsible for the attack, including yourself, into human custody. Disband your military entirely and submit to human oversight for the next century. Kazeth's eyes flared. That is impossible. The Dominion would never accept. Then your military ceases to exist in 1 hour, Jack replied coldly. You started this war. I will finish it. The transmission ended. For 60 minutes, the human fleet held position. Jack didn't want civilian blood on his hands. He had given the warlord an escape, however unlikely it was to be taken. The hour passed. No surrender came. Time, Jack said quietly. Begin orbital strikes. The sky above Kareth Prime ignited. Human warships unleashed precise, devastating firepower. Every target had been verified. Every strike calculated to avoid civilian population centers. Military bases vanished in controlled firestorms. Orbital platforms shattered. Shipyards melted into slag. For 6 hours, the bombardment continued. When it ended, the Dominion military, an institution that had ruled through terror for centuries, was gone. The planet itself still lived. 8 billion civilians stared up at the sky, watching foreign warships occupy orbit where their protectors once stood. They had never felt so defenseless. General Miriam Hampton led the ground operation personally. Her Special Forces unit breached the warlord's underground command bunker beneath the shattered capital. Inside, the once feared Kazeth was found crouched in the shadows, armor discarded, weapon untouched. Supreme Warlord Kazeth, Hampton said, her voice steady. By authority of the Human Federation, you are under arrest for crimes against humanity. You cannot do this, he hissed. I have diplomatic immunity. Hampton's eyes were cold. You lost at the moment you targeted children. She nodded to her soldiers. Take him. In chains, Kazef was marched past survivors from New Haven, men and women who had lost everything. He did not meet their eyes. Across the galaxy, shock rippled outward. Empires that had ruled through fear watched in silence as the Dominion collapsed in less than a week. And on Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council descended into chaos. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Delegates from 100 worlds sat frozen on their platforms as holographic feeds played throughout the chamber. Images no one could deny and no one could forget. Burned-out hospitals on New Haven. Collapsed schools with children's belongings scattered in the rubble. Mass graves carved into the soil where civilians had been executed without mercy. Ambassador Henry Hale stood once again on humanity's platform, his posture straight, his face carved from grief and resolve. High Counselor Mirialis spoke first, her golden form flickering with agitation. Ambassador Hale, the Council demands an explanation. Humanity has launched a full-scale assault against the Dominion, violating multiple treaties. Henry's eyes hardened. Unprovoked assault? He asked calmly. The Dominion killed over 2 million of our civilians without warning. They bombed our cities and demanded our surrender. Where were these treaties then? A murmur rippled through the chamber. The council was prepared to mediate. Mirialis replied weakly. Mediation that rewarded mass murder, Henry said. He shook his head. We asked for justice. We were told to kneel. He activated his console. The chamber filled with new footage, Dominion troops executing civilians, targeting evacuation centers, firing on hospitals marked with universal medical symbols. This, Henry said, voice steady but sharp, is what the council was willing to overlook. Silence followed. From his platform, Counselor Threxian stepped forward. The elderly scholar's voice carried surprising strength. I warned them, he said. I warned the Dominion what would happen if they attacked humanity. I studied their history. I understood what violence against their children would awaken. He turned slowly, addressing the entire council. This is not aggression. This is consequence. The Dominion struck first. Humanity responded, under any law, galactic or otherwise. That response is justified. Several smaller delegations began to signal agreement. These were worlds that had lived for centuries under the threat of Dominion expansion, worlds that had paid tribute or lost territory, simply to survive. High Counselor Mirialis raised her hands. Order. The council will now vote. The decision took less than 10 minutes. By a decisive majority, the council formally recognized humanity's right to self-defense. The Dominion was ordered to surrender its remaining military assets, pay reparations to New Haven, and submit to oversight for 100 years. The age of Dominion dominance was over. 2 months later, Admiral Jack Rourke stood on the bridge of the Defiance for the last time. The war was finished. Reconstruction crews had returned to New Haven. New cities were rising from the ruins, this time shielded by orbital defenses powerful enough to deter any future attack. Lieutenant Commander Kate Morgan approached quietly. Sir, message from Earth Command. Jack turned. Go ahead. You've been promoted to Fleet Admiral, she said, and appointed director of the newly formed Galactic Defense Initiative. Jack nodded but did not smile. Later, alone, he took out the photograph he kept in his pocket. Ambassador Hale's family. Children who would never grow up. Lives erased by arrogance and cruelty. Kate hesitated at the doorway. Sir, do you regret what we did? Jack looked at the image for a long moment. I regret that it was necessary, he said finally. I regret every life lost. I regret that we couldn't stop the attack before it began. He slipped the photo away. But do I regret defending our people? He shook his head. No, I would make the same choice again. He walked to the viewport, gazing out at the stars. Some species now looked at humanity with fear, others with respect, and some, quietly, with hope. Humanity had not sought this war, but it had ended it. The Defiance jumped to hyperspace, carrying its crew home to a galaxy forever changed. The message was clear. Humanity does not forget. Humanity does not forgive unprovoked slaughter. And humanity will always protect its own. The fall of the Dominion did not end the ripples. It amplified them. Across the galaxy, intelligence networks scrambled to reassess humanity. Long-standing threat models were discarded overnight. Civilizations that had once categorized humans as minor participants reclassified them as a Tier 1 power, a designation reserved for species capable of reshaping entire regions of space through force or influence. And humanity had done both. On Earth, the United Human Assembly convened once more. This time, there were no arguments, no posturing, no political theater. The cost of hesitation had already been paid in blood. The Galactic Defense Initiative, GDI, was formally ratified. Fleet Admiral Jack Rourke stood before the assembled leaders, his uniform crisp, his eyes tired but unwavering. "We will not become conquerors," he said. "We will not rule through fear. But we will ensure that no species ever again believes humanity can be attacked without consequence." The mandate was clear: deterrence through readiness, peace through strength. Within weeks, joint defense treaties were signed with dozens of smaller civilizations, worlds that had lived under the shadow of stronger empires for generations. Humanity did not demand tribute. It did not claim territory. It offered protection. On New Haven, rebuilding continued at a relentless pace. Shield generators rose above city centers. Orbital defense platforms hummed silently in high orbit. Memorials were constructed where mass graves had once scarred the land. General Miriam Hampton walked through one such site, helmet tucked under her arm. Names were being etched into polished black stone, millions of them. A young survivor stood nearby, staring at the wall. "My parents are there," the child said softly, pointing. Hampton knelt beside him. "They won't be forgotten," she said. "I promise." Back on Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council struggled to adapt to a new reality. Diplomats who had once dismissed humanity now spoke carefully, choosing words with deliberate precision. Military observers requested joint exercises. Trade alliances were renegotiated on equal terms. Councillor Threxian watched it all from his platform, his expression unreadable. "They have learned," he said quietly to a fellow delegate. "Yes," the other replied. "Through fear." Threxian shook his head. "No, through consequence. There is a difference." In a secure detention facility orbiting Earth, Supreme Warlord Kazeth awaited trial. Gone was the towering figure of dominance. Gone was the laughter. He sat alone in a containment cell, staring at a transparent barrier that reflected his own image back at him. Smaller, diminished. Human prosecutors prepared a case that spanned thousands of documented war crimes. Testimony poured in from New Haven survivors. Footage, orders, command logs. There would be no escape through politics or technicalities. The galaxy was watching. On the bridge of the Defiance, now docked above Earth, Kate Morgan reviewed incoming reports. "Fleet readiness at 98%, she said. "GDI patrols active across 6 sectors. Jack nodded. "Good." He looked out at the planet below, blue, green, alive. Humanity had stared extinction in the face more than once throughout its history. Every time it had adapted, hardened, endured. This time was no different. A message request flashed on Jack's console, priority diplomatic channel. "Put it through." A representative from a neighboring empire appeared on screen, his posture rigid. "Fleet Admiral Rourke." The alien said, "We wish to formally acknowledge humanity's strength and propose a non-aggression pact." Jack listened carefully. When the transmission ended, Kate raised an eyebrow. "That's the third one today." Jack allowed himself a faint, humorless smile. "They're afraid." "Is that a problem?" she asked. He considered the question. "Fear fades," he said. "Respect lasts longer. Our job is to make sure the galaxy learns the difference." Elsewhere, far beyond human-controlled space, military planners gathered in darkened chambers. Maps were redrawn. Invasion doctrines were scrapped. One phrase echoed again and again in classified briefings. "Do not provoke the humans." Because the lesson of New Haven had spread. Attack a human colony, and they will come for you, hurt their civilians, and they will dismantle your empire. Laugh at their grief, and they will ensure history remembers your name as a warning. Late that night, Jack stood alone on an observation deck overlooking Earth. He thought of the children who would never grow up, the families erased in moments, the price humanity had paid to teach the galaxy a single truth: peace is not given, it is defended, and humanity was ready. Years later, historians would struggle to define the moment the galaxy truly changed. Some would point to the bombardment of New Haven, others to the collapse of the Dominion's military in less than a week. A few would argue it was the silence that followed, the sudden, uneasy restraint of empires that had once ruled through unchecked force. But those who understood humanity best knew the truth. The galaxy changed the moment humans decided that their children were worth any price. Fleet Admiral Jack Rourke stood before the Galactic Tribunal, hands clasped behind his back. The chamber was smaller than the council hall, but its presence carried more weight. This was where history was judged, not debated. Supreme Warlord Kazeth stood within a containment field at the center of the room. The once feared conqueror looked smaller now, his scales dulled, his posture broken. The charges were read aloud: genocide, crimes against sentient life, violations of galactic law beyond counting. Evidence followed: recorded orders, battlefield transmissions, survivor testimony. No defense could erase the images of burning hospitals and shattered schools. When asked if he had anything to say, Kazeth lifted his head slowly. "You humans are monsters," he said bitterly. "You destroyed everything I built." Jack met his gaze. "No," he replied evenly. "We destroyed what you built on the bodies of innocent people." The verdict was unanimous: life imprisonment, no parole, no political concessions. Justice finally delivered. Across human space, the years that followed were not defined by conquest, but by vigilance. The Galactic Defense Initiative expanded, not to dominate, but to deter. Patrol fleets kept trade lanes secure. Rapid response units intervened when weaker worlds were threatened. Human warships became symbols of safety as often as fear. On New Haven, a new city rose along the rebuilt coastline. Schools reopened. Children played beneath clear skies, protected by defense platforms that never slept. A memorial stood at the city's heart. It did not glorify war. It listed names, millions of them, etched into stone so smooth it reflected the sky. General Miriam Hampton visited often. "They're growing up safe," she said quietly to Jack during one visit. "That's what matters." Jack nodded. It always was. On Nexus Prime, Counselor Threxian addressed a new generation of delegates. His voice was calm, measured, scholarly as always. "Many believe humans are dangerous because of their weapons," he said. "That is incorrect." He paused, letting the room settle. "Humans are dangerous because of what they value." He displayed an image: human families standing together in the aftermath of disaster, hands linked, faces resolute. They do not fight for territory. They do not fight for conquest. They fight for each other. And when you threaten what they love, they will accept any cost to protect it. Silence followed. No one argued. Back aboard the Defiance, now serving as the flagship of the GDI, Jack stood at the viewport one final time before retirement. Stars stretched endlessly before him, beautiful, indifferent. Kate Morgan joined him, now a captain in her own right. "The galaxy's quieter these days," she said. "Fear does that," Jack replied. She shook her head. "Respect does." Jack smiled faintly. Humanity had not sought to become the galaxy's warning, but it had become its lesson. Some species fought for power. Some fought for resources. Some fought because they knew nothing else. Humans fought for family. And that, more than fleets, more than weapons, more than strategies, made them the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever known. The Defiance drifted forward, a silent guardian among the stars. Humanity had taken its place, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as protectors who would never again allow their people to be slaughtered in silence. The galaxy remembered, and it would never forget.